Welcome to Breaking Financial Chains, where we combine practical money guidance with emotional healing to help you break free from financial limitations. I'm Tanya Riverson, your financial wingwoman.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Breaking Financial Chains. I'm so happy that you're here. We're getting close to nearly 30 episodes that we're recording, so we're going to keep rolling with this. If you've stuck with me, thank you so much. If there's any particular areas that you would like me to cover, please do say. I would always love the feedback. And let's get started on today. So for today's episode, we're talking about the power of saying no and setting financial boundaries. Easier for some, not so easy for others. The theme is around protecting your energy, not just your wealth, but also income and peace without any guilt. I think the key, as with so many things to do with finances or decisions that you want to make and being intentional, is that you've got to be clear on where you're headed. You've got to be clear on what the purpose you have in mind for your money is, because that makes things so much easier from a boundaries perspective. But when you're the one that people lean on, the fixer, the organizer, the provider in a lot of cases, and no one's asking you how you're doing, that can be really quite tricky. And when you're balancing a lot of plates and you're wearing a lot of hats, sometimes the boundaries and the lines can get a little bit blurred. So I suppose speaking to business women, high earners, people that are always there for everyone else except yourself, this episode is absolutely for you. So this all comes at a cost, right? When we give too much of ourselves away, whether that is energy or time or on the financial side of things, then there is always going to be a hidden cost to that. The hidden cost of constantly saying yes to what everybody else asks of you, whether that's overgiving to friends, to family, to bailing out a sibling, to your kids for the peace that it gives you, to clients, where that may well be overgiving in terms of services and your time. It can be a huge drain. You know, how much of you is left at the end of all of that constant giving? But what you're actually telling your subconscious, what you're telling yourself in that situation, is that you yourself don't value your time and energy, and you're massively undervaluing what that is worth to you and what you could be doing instead with those resources, with that time, energy and the finances. And what can happen is that we end up feeling a lot of resentment, financial resentment, in terms of what the cost is and buying peace but losing power, and how the people around you treat you as a result of that, where you basically end up feeling like a walking wallet rather than the whole person that you are. So if you're in conversations with people, thinking about some examples of what a lack of boundaries sounds like, and some of this is certainly, these are examples of what I've heard talking to clients when we've had coaching sessions, are things like, well, I didn't want to disappoint them, particularly in relation to children or clients that you feel you've got some sort of obligation to if you're already working with them. It was just easier to say yes, particularly if you're stressed, if you're under a lot of pressure from an employment or from your business point of view. There's only so many hours in the day, right? And sometimes saying yes to something and buying you back a little bit of time can make all the difference between going to bed at a normal time or needing to burn the midnight oil to get something finished. Another common comments that I get from clients is that, well, they know I have it, they know I have the money, so how can I say no? Again, particularly with family members or children, they know that that's perhaps less of an issue than for some people. Saying no just feels like you're being mean, in inverted commas, you're being mean by saying no. And another one, purely from a mum guilt point of view, I didn't want my kid, or I don't want my kids to grow up feeling the way I did when I was growing up, when no perhaps was the default option, perhaps because of completely different circumstances. And listen, it can be a massive driver for people to want to be successful, to be able to have the money and the freedom to be able to provide perhaps what you didn't have. But we have to consider the longer term impact of what that means, both for yourself and what that is teaching your kids, and how that is going to teach them to perhaps raise their children at some point in the future. And I think the key to remember is that having boundaries is not selfish. You know, you can be generous and still say no. You can provide for people and still set a limit or a boundary. Boundaries create safety at the end of the day. They create safety for you and they create safety for your relationships. But without those boundaries, without those lines in the sand, it's super easy to overstep and to not really think about the consequences, because we're thinking and they're thinking about themselves. But every yes costs you something. It costs you time, it costs you energy, it costs you long-term security if you consider what the opportunity cost of saying yes on a financial basis is going to mean for you. So here are some signs that you could perhaps notice in your behaviour and the way things tend to go in your life that could highlight that you're perhaps in need of some financial boundaries. And these could be something that you could consider putting in place, maybe one at a time, maybe start flexing your muscles just to see how it feels. You could, if you feel guilty, spending on yourself is a really big one. Worrying about, well, somebody else needs something instead, rather than you spending on yourself. You're the one that puts all of the effort in. You're the one that's creating the financial freedom, that's creating those financial buffers. But if you're feeling guilty about buying something for yourself, then that's something to notice. And we talk about having awareness and being curious in many of the episodes that I've recorded now. And it really is the key to starting to have it's the spidey senses. It's the, I'm going to write that down and I'm going to come back to that and I'm going to have a think about what that really means when I have that thought. I don't deserve that, or I shouldn't be spending that on myself, or something along those lines. You'll know yourself. It's just about having an awareness and noticing when you're saying certain things, or you're perhaps putting yourself down or behind a list of other people. If you're saying yes out of obligation rather than joy. So notice how it feels when you do say yes. So rather than feeling I have to say no to everybody, maybe just start with, am I saying yes for the right reasons? What is this? What am I gaining? What am I losing? Or what is this costing me? Take the money out of the equation in terms of energy or time or respect in that relationship. Or is this an expectation that I'm now opening up to constantly being asked again and again? But how does it make you feel? It's totally fine if you're happy to give and spend on other people, if that fills you with joy, if that gives you some sense of gratification for the right reasons. What's the point of having money and earning money and having that freedom if we can't do what we enjoy the most? So it's noticing that, most importantly. Noticing if you've got like a secret resentment that's bubbling under the surface that you can't quite put your finger on. It's noticing when that flares up, and that can be in conversations, it can be when thoughts hit you, it can be when you're watching something on the telly or mindlessly trying to unwind in the evening. Notice what you think the source of that resentment is, and is it something that needs to be digged into a little bit deeper. Another key sign that you need financial boundaries is having lost complete sense of what your needs are. Do you actually know what your needs are? If you've got no idea what your needs are anymore, maybe it's time to dial things back and stop considering what everybody else needs and start devoting a little bit of time to you and what you need and what you want and what makes you happy. And if you're listening to these suggestions of signs that you might need financial boundaries, thinking, well, they all apply to me, or I've never considered any of those points, then it's definitely time to get a date in the diary, get your journal out, get your planner out, and start to give some thought to these things. And it's really important to just start, I think, rather than, well, I don't know where to start. Well, I can help you with that. I can give you some examples now of how to start setting those boundaries. A really key place where to start is to know where your money is going and where your money is coming from. So maybe just start there. Look at what you're spending, who you're giving money to. Not necessarily just your money, it can be your time as well, thinking about things as resources in general. We only have so many spoons in a day, we only have so much energy that we can donate and give to other people, and it's really, really important that we give some of those to ourselves as an absolute minimum. So, how to start setting boundaries without the guilt spiral, which is super, super important. Firstly, we want to get clear on what you can actually afford. So some of the things that can happen if we're always giving and always saying yes, and if we're not keeping an eye on how much that is, purely from a financial point of view, or we don't track our spending, things can get a little bit out of hand, and it can get to a point where you're saying yes because you always have, but to say no might mean you have to say to somebody, I actually can't afford that. I actually don't have the same capacity that I used to, and that can feel massively uncomfortable. But if you're in a position to see that you actually can't afford it, you can take action. You can change with some of these boundaries that we're going to talk about. It's not necessarily just about financially affording something though. It's about energetically, what can you afford? Do you need to have some of that time for yourself? Is it really important that you get to go to bed early on your own to be able to just spend a bit of time in your own energy? Is it taking a bubble bath? Is it taking a walk by yourself? Is it spending time in a coffee shop without somebody following you and then expecting to get those drinks and cake and whatever else comes with it at the same time because that's where you're going? Thinking about what is important to you and how do you re-energize? How do you start to feel like you can now give something back because you've plugged yourself in to do something that makes you feel good? Practicing safe no's. So saying no in a way that makes you feel less uncomfortable, perhaps, if you really, really don't want to be the one to say no, because perhaps that was something that you constantly heard in your childhood. Even though there may well have been some capacity, the stock response was always no from dad, for example. It can be super hard for you to be able to say that yourself, but as well as recognizing that that's perhaps the reason why you find it hard rather than it's the wrong answer is a key distinction. But saying I'm not able to fund that right now, or that's not in my budget at the moment, or I'm focusing on X, Y and Z right now, I don't want to spend money on that. Coming up with something that you feel comfortable to share without giving too much away. Creating your own personal spending rules and then sticking to them. This is such a valuable exercise from a self-belief point of view. So understanding that when you create a boundary and when you write something down, even if it's something like drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, always taking vitamins or supplements or whatever it is, part of the reason why we tell ourselves we can't do it is because, well, I never follow through when I say I'm going to do that. And it's the same with something like this. If you create a boundary and you can show yourself, show your brain and your subconscious that when I create a boundary, when I create a rule, I actually stick to it. So when we start to journal and when we start to identify things that are really of importance to us, and we create a boundary or a rule or a process perhaps that you want to follow, you can then believe that you can do that for yourself because you've been practicing it already, because you've been saying, I have this amount of money that I can spend on shopping trips with the kids, or money that I can lend my sister, or whatever it might be. How much you're going to spend in a coffee shop over a month. Once you get to that limit and we stop, then we're completing that loop. We set a boundary, we're sticking to it, and our brain starts to believe when we set further boundaries, and when we explain that to other people, they're going to believe it as well. With kids in particular, it's about teaching value, not just about the price, and letting them hear the word no. I mean, how easy is it just to keep saying yes? But for them to understand that no doesn't mean they're in trouble, no doesn't mean you don't love them, it just means no for now, or no, not on that particular thing. And it can be a really good learning lesson for them to understand that your bank account, your credit card, however you're funding, is not a bottomless pit. It is something that is of value to you, and any money spent on this is money not spent elsewhere. So it's giving away something that could be of value to future you. So thinking about longer term financial planning and saving and investing, if we're not spending on something that brings us joy and fulfills us, that's money that we can't do something else with that could provide those things for us. So some examples of scripts that you could learn, or stock responses, might be something along the lines of, I love you and I want to help, but I can't fund that right now. I can't fund that at this time. Or, that's not something I'm covering, but I can support you in figuring it out. Another really powerful, just because you need something does not mean you come to me. Maybe we can look at alternative ways that we can start to enable those people, children, siblings, clients, to figure things out for themselves, to find an alternate way rather than just relying on you. Another really powerful thing that you can say, my money is allocated to goals I've worked hard for. I'm protecting those right now. So that is a great way of demonstrating that you have other plans, and that's okay to have those other plans, and sharing those goals and those dreams and those ideas with family members and with our kids can help them to see that they can do the same. So none of this is coming from a place of deprivation or lack. This is about making financial choices that make sense for you without giving away your power, without being in a place where you feel like you're just constantly being drained by other people around you. So the most important thing to come out of this episode, I think, is about learning, ideally from a financial standpoint, but this can apply to any areas in life. It's learning to reframe no as a kindness. So there's a bigger purpose to your actions and what you're trying to help them with. You're teaching your kids how to set boundaries. So rather than just expecting that that's what a parent does, you're showing them that that's, first of all, that's not necessarily the case, and second of all, it's going to be okay for them in the future to act in the same way. How is this helping them? By constantly just saying yes and providing all of the time. You're giving others a chance to grow their own capacity. So why look elsewhere? Why create more work for yourself if they just need to come to you for that financial support or that help or that energy that you're going to give to them? Encourage them to stretch their own financial and emotional muscles to be able to figure things out in their own way. And you're also preserving your health, wealth and peace by saying no from a place of kindness. It's perfectly okay to say no for the right reasons. It's also perfectly okay to say yes, but make sure that it is for the right reasons. So to close off today, I want to just reiterate that saying no from a financial standpoint or any standpoint is not a betrayal. It is an act of self-respect. And being able to flex those muscles is a great way of reinforcing your own self-belief that you can make those decisions and you're doing it for the right reasons for yourself. And that is okay. No is a complete sentence. By the way, you don't have to justify or explain yourself. We can just say, no, I'm not doing that right now, or however you want to word it. You don't exist to be drained. You exist to be well. and putting yourself first every now and then is actually really important. And your future self will thank you for every boundary that you honour. You know, you can create a savings pot for spending on yourself, create a savings pot for, well, just to save. You know, it can be just something extra that you're building up, and to show yourself how much you could have in that pot when you don't give that away. So give it some thought. I would love to hear your feedback, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining me today on Breaking Financial Chains. Remember, you have the power to transform your relationship with money one step at a time. If this episode helped you, please subscribe and leave a review to help others find their path to financial freedom. I'm Tanya, your financial wing woman, and I'll see you next week.